Thanks for the introduction and thanks for the invitation. So I'm actually a computer scientist, and I'm actually working a lot these days on machine learning and AI. So my research is about AI privacy, and I'm a privacy commissioner at the CNIL in charge of AI. So I'm not really an expert in the neurotech, although I have some idea that I would like to share with you, and I would really like to get your feedback on what I'm presenting. So what I call cognitive security, as you know, and as we all know, big tech and government are collecting a lot of data, personal data about ourselves, like behavioral data, location data, or interest data. And our brain is still remain a privacy fortress, but we don't know for how long, right? And there is like three developments that are a bit concerning, and I guess you all know because we've been discussing about that in the last 2 days. It's the development of neurotech, the development of psychological profiling like it was used in Cambridge Analytica cases, and the development of AI. So the combination of these three developments is actually changing quite drastically the privacy landscape. And there is really different form of cognitive attacks, or attacks on our brain, although I mean, here we're mostly talking about neurotech technology. There are other forms of attacks that can come from fake news, like misinformation. Also, as I already said, personalized manipulation that use your psychological profiling, like in Cambridge Analytica, but also dark patterns, you know, all these interfaces that are trying to fool you or influence or manipulate your decision. So I really think that there is a need for conceptualization of all this attack on our brains, or what I call cognitive security. And we know that this field is growing, and there is a need to regulate all these attacks. And we've seen that policymakers are struggling to respond because the issue is it's under conceptualized. As we've seen this morning during this very nice talk of Diego, I mean, there is a lot of regulation going on, and sometimes this regulation do not make sense, because my impression is that we still don't fully understand what we're trying to regulate, and the attacks are not very clear. So I really think, coming from the computer science field, that there is a lot of things that can be borrowed from what has been done in this in the field of computer security, but also in the field of machine learning security. And so basically, I mean, what do we do in computer science when we want to secure something? We first start by defining what are the security properties that you want to provide. And secondly, we need to define what are the attack vectors, which, I mean, how can actually this attack be performed? And so the first thing is, what kind of property can we, I mean, are we looking for? As a computer scientist, I tend to see the brain as a black box, and because I don't know, I mean, what's inside. And securing a black box in computer science basically means providing three different properties. The first one is confidentiality, which means that you try to protect against an adversary that aim at extracting or inferring secret from the box. So it's maybe similar to what you call in your community mental privacy. Then the second aspect is integrity. You try to protect against an adversary that aim at modifying how the box is working. So maybe this is what you call mental integrity. And the third one, which I don't think is really capturing in what I mean, I've seen so far, it's availability, which means you try to protect against an adversary that aim at decreasing the performance of the box. So it doesn't want to get the information, doesn't want to modify the box, just want to decrease the performance. It's typically what we call denial of service attack. And if you provide these three properties in computer science, basically it means you are able to secure your device. The other maybe thing that we should look into, it's machine learning and the attacks that are currently performed on machine learning. And the interesting thing is that, as we all know, machine learning was built by, got inspired by the brain, all the brain work, especially if you consider neural networks type of machine learning. And it's not surprising to see that basically they, at a very high level, they work very similarly. So I'm not saying that the brain is working as a machine learning algorithm, but at a high level, it's quite similar. So how does a machine learning algorithm works? You basically have some training data that you feed into an algorithm that will generate a model. And then the model will be deployed and will generate action. So basically, I'm sure you all use ChatGPT. ChatGPT is the model, is not the algorithm, right? So the ChatGPT was developed by the company using billions of data, generated the model, and then they deploy the model, and the model is used basically to perform some action. If we look at how the brain work at a very high level, so that's a very, once again, simple meta model. I'm not saying again that it's the same than machine learning, but the brain is basically processing a lot of data coming from the news, coming from your education, sensors, the smells, and so on, and generate what is called a cognitive model. And then whenever you have to make an action or make a decision, you basically stimulate your cognitive model, and this turns into something that will, that's turned into an action. So you have like a learning phase, and you have a decision phase. So this is basically the model that I'm assuming. Now, if we agree on this model, we could just think together about the different types of attacks that can be performed on this system. Well, if we go back to machine learning, there are basically 4 different types of attacks. You could attack the training data, right? You could attack the algorithm, the training algorithm. You could attack the model that is generated, or you could attack the execution, the phase that is turning the decision into an action and execution. So for the brain, it's actually exactly the same thing. So you could either use data pollution algorithm, you can just attack physically the brain, the model, or the execution attack. So I will go maybe a bit more into the details to illustrate what I mean. But the first attack, which is trying to attack the training data in machine learning, what it means that if I have this system, sorry, I have this, training, this machine learning system that takes as input images that are labeled with a label. So in this case, we have images of pets, and the label is the name of the pet. So the first one is a cat, then a lion, and so on. We feed all this data into the algorithm. It will generate a model that will be able to tell you, given a new image, whether it's a cat, dog, or whatever, right? So the first attack basically consists of modifying the training data as a malicious adversary. If I just modify the names, the label, so instead of saying it's a pig, I say it's a dog, the algorithm will just learn that this type of animal is a dog, right? Although it's actually not a dog already. So this is really an integrity attack, because the generated model that will be generated from this data will just be modified. So you basically succeeded to perform an integrity attack. For the brain, it's actually similar, right? But this is what we call misinformation. If you feed the brain with wrong information or fake news, the brain will learn will be influenced by this type of thing. So you're performing like an integrity attack on the brain. The second type of attacks is the attack where you physically access, for machine learning, the algorithm, and for the brain would be physical attacks. And this is, I guess, what would be closest to attacks that use neurotech, because the neurotech are physically next to the brain. And once again, we already talked about that during the last 2 days, so I'm not going to more into the details, but there are some attacks that shows that from EEG, for example, you can recover the security passwords of people, or there's the attack that was already mentioned already, that you can recover, you can reconstruct the speech from some of other type of sensors. The third type of attacks is actually you trying not to attack the data or the algorithm, but you're trying to attack the generated model. And this is maybe the most interesting attack, because it's not going to try to modify the box. I mean, the brain is just trying to exploit some of the vulnerability of the box. For example, using cognitive biases. So this is very similar to what we called in machine learning adversarial examples. So I don't know if you know this type of attacks on machine learning, but let's say I have a machine learning system that, given a photo, tells you what kind of animal is on this image. So in this case, I showed a photo of a panda, and it tells you it's a panda with a probability close to 60%. There are some studies that show if you add noise, of course, noise that is specifically chosen, and add it to the photo, you get the second photo, which is for a human. I mean, you don't see the difference. But in this case, the model will consider that the photo corresponds to the photo of a gibbons, right, with a very high probability. And basically, these attacks are just fooling the model. And there are some research works that show that all AI systems are vulnerable to this attack. You cannot avoid them. It's difficult to find these inputs, but they are very hard to avoid. And it's actually quite interesting to see that the similar attack exists on the human brain. And I will give you an example. So if I show you these images, I guess you all see these blue lines, they are parallel, they look parallel. Now, if I'm adding a little bit of noise, you get these images, right? So you should not see them parallel anymore. And actually, they are parallel, although it's exactly the same image. So I'm just putting the two photos next to each other. I don't know if you are able to see the noise that was added in the second photo. Okay. I mean, this is this part, right? We're just able to, I mean, if you rotate the black and the white square, you're just fooling the humans, feeling that this image appears. And so this is exactly what it's called adversarial example in machine learning, trying to find inputs that will fool the brain. And the fourth type of attack is what we call execution attack, where basically you're not trying to modify the decision, but you're trying to make the action, which is the implementation of the decision into an action, difficult. And this is typically what it's called in our community, the dark patterns, which are all these interface that are very difficult. Like typically you want to disable tracking on your smartphone. You have to go through like a series of 4 levels. So they make it much more difficult than necessary. And most people just give up because they don't know how to do it. And this is what we call the execution attack. I mean, these attacks are not changing your decision. They're just trying to make the execution of the decision very difficult. Another example of dark patterns where you have like for cookies, this accept and reject button, and you will use different colors, trying to make sure that the colors, the blue in this case, is the accept button. So, I mean, this presentation is really, it's a call for interdisciplinary research agenda and cognitive security. We should really, I think, work on this topic together, with the first objective being to understand what's going on with like a rigorous analysis framework of these cognitive attacks. And I think that there is a lot of things we could borrow from what has been done in the field of computer security and machine learning security. The other objective would be to design some solution to secure the brain. By that, I mean secure, of course, communication. Like, I mean, I was surprised to see that the Neuralink device that are being designed by Elon Musk are currently using Bluetooth as a communication between the implant and the computers. But we should also think about secure architecture, or to minimize data collection, for example, by performing on-device computation. Instead of collecting the data, some of the data could actually stay on the device, and we could actually distribute the computation instead of collecting the data. That's what is also called the federated machine learning, where you basically distribute the computation instead of distributing the data in order to minimize the risk. And of course, there is secure hardware that could be very useful. And the other line of research could be working on cognitive pets. So pets being, it means privacy-enhancing tools, like tools that could anonymize some of the data or minimize. And the third point would be regulation and policy. Try to work on efficient regulation or not, because I mean, from Diego's presentation, it's not clear whether we need more regulation. And actually, I don't know, I mean, especially in Europe, whether the combination of GDPR and the new AI Act would be enough, because it's actually covering a lot of the things. And I'm not convinced that we need an additional regulation. And once again, we should consider attacks resulting from neuro attack, but also the attacks that are remote attacks, like the one performed in the case in the Cambridge Analytica scenario. So some of the more technical open question and open research challenge are typically, can neural data, for example, EEG, be anonymized? They are very complex data, temporal data with a lot of information. It's not obvious today that those data could actually be anonymized. Are this type of data unique and identifiable? Is there any information within this data that could be used to identify people or not? Could we minimize the data that is collected? So typically what the devices are currently doing is that they're collecting everything, and then they are processing the data in order to provide the service that they want to provide. A better approach, which is actually part of the GDPR, is that you should minimize the data that you collect. Can we build, once again, secure and private BCI architecture that minimize computation, perform on-device computation, and use secure hardware? And the last point, which is something which I think is more long-term, is can we actually learn from machine learning security? I mean, as we know, again, machine learning was invented from inspired from the brain. There's a lot of work on machine learning security, and I'm wondering if some of the work that is being done in machine learning security could be feedback into brain security. Can we get inspired by those solutions to try to secure our brain? That's it. Thanks a lot for your attention.